Well, hello and welcome to Knife Delights. Thank you for joining me on this journey as we examine 5 different companies and their house brand knives. Now, what is a house brand knife? Well, we're all familiar with Ozark Trail and Walmart and how Ozark Trail makes these exclusively for Walmart. So it's a Walmart house brand. And then I've got a Guidesman here, and Guidesman is a house brand for Menards, which is a big hardware lumber store. Well, they've become much more than that. But yeah, so here's a couple of modern house brands that maybe you're familiar with. But let's take a look at Hibbard and Simmons and Shapleigh and Woolworth and Sears. And let's just check out their knives. So let's begin this journey by exploring Hibbard, Spencer, and Bartlett. They were out of Chicago, Illinois. And they were in business from roughly 1855 to 1960. So what I have here is a little bit of little two-bladed jackknife here, and this is model 101. And there's Hibbard, Spencer, and Bartlett and Company. And there you can see the model number. Nice bone here. Yeah, just a nice little two-bladed jackknife. It's believed that the knives for HSB were made by Ulster, Camillus, New York Life, and Trade. In 1932, HSB used the True Value trademark. Another trademark featured on some of their knives was OVB, or Our Very Best. In 1962, HSB was sold to John Kutter and Company for the True Value brand name. Hey, now you know the origin of True Value hardware. Typically, most of the store brand knives were made for hardware stores. But there's one company here that kind of broke that mold, and that was the F.W. Woolworth Company. It was a retail company and one of the pioneers of the five and dime store. The first Woolworth store was opened by Frank Winfield Woolworth on February 22, 1879, as Woolworth's Great 5-cent store in Utica, New York. 2 Woolworth brothers pioneered and developed merchandising, direct purchasing, sales, and customer service practices commonly used today. The chain went out of business in July of 1997 when the company decided to focus primarily on sporting goods and renamed itself the Venator Group. Kent knives were made by Camillus circa 1931 to 1955. So Kent was the store brand or the house brand for Woolworths. I do happen to have a couple of them right here. This is a Kent. And we look at the tang stamp there. Kent, New York City, USA. Just a nice little two-bladed jackknife here. Oh, needs some oil though. Of course, the easy opening on both sides. Yeah, just a dandy little pocket knife there. And I also have a cattle knife. You can see its equal end as the punch, your spay blade, and your clip point blade there. So I think that looks like it is bone. I'm not totally sure. But as you can see, this is one of the knives I got set aside for a refurbishing project. But there's another one of the Kent knives. So Woolworth and Kent. Let's move along to E.C. Simmons Hardware of St. Louis, Missouri. And the King Kutter brand was used by that hardware store beginning around 1870. Simmons also owned controlling interest in the Walden Knife Company. In 1923, Simmons and Winchester merged. For the next 10 years, the knives would be made by Winchester. In 1940, the merged companies were split again when Shapleigh Hardware purchased assets of Simmons and Walden Knife. The brand and knife patterns were continued by Shapleigh. So as you can see here, we have a chart kind of showing from the 40s to the 60s when Shapleigh replaced the E.C. Simmons. And onwards down till today, the King Kutter name is still around. However, it is not owned by Shapleigh Hardware, and we're going to be getting into Shapleigh here in just a moment. Now, I currently don't own any King Cutter knives, but I did at one time. I purchased this old, well, like a paring knife or a small bird and trout knife in an antique store, and I did some general cleaning on it, and then I sent it off to Jerry at Big J's Knives, and he put a nice edge on it. And then John at J.O. Ventures, well, he made a very nice sheath for it. And then the full restoration, which was a beautiful job there, was by Byron at Splitting Slices. And then we sent the knife off as a gift to Ray at North Star Knife Reviews. I'll put a link to his video in the description box below. Just a wonderful package. Byron also built a little storage or presentation box for the knife. Ray also received a King Cutter mug and some stickers. And oh, it was just a fantastic project. So make sure and check out that video. Well, there was another St. Louis-based company called Shapleigh Hardware, and it was in business roughly from 1843 to 1960. Now, this is one of the company brand names that I do not have. I do not happen to have a Shapleigh Hardware knife. I did see a butter knife up in a local antique store from Shapleigh, but I did not purchase it. Shapleigh Hardware used the Diamond Edge trademark from 1864 to 1960. DE was also used by the Norvell Shapleigh from 1902 to 1915 and by Valtest from 1960 to 1965. In 1967, Imperial acquired the trademark. It is possible that Taylor Brands LLC acquired the rights to the trademark of Diamond Edge and the DE logo around 2005 when they purchased the intellectual property of the Imperial Schrade Corporation. So once again, I did say I don't have any of the Shapleigh knives, but I do have a couple of Imperial knives that have the Diamond Edge logo. And here's a Stockman. This is an Imperial Ireland, one of their Stockmans. I actually found this new in the package, and I did an opening, cut it out of the bubble pack and everything. So kind of a neat knife, brand new old stock, if you will. And then here is one of the old Diamond Edge logoed ones from Imperial USA. Just a nice two-bladed jackknife here. Now we're going to move along to Sears and Roebuck, and I tell you what, I really discovered some fascinating information. We're all pretty familiar with the Sears Craftsman line of knives, but before we had the Sears Craftsman, we had Wilbert cutlery knives, and these knives were contracted and made for Sears by the Napanook and Empire Knife Companies. The Wilbert Cutlery Company was out of Chicago, Illinois, and it was in business from around 1908 to 1921. They also, the Cutlery Company also made razors and that and sold them to Sears also. I also ran across this interesting piece of information. This is a quote from Bernard Devine. He is an author of many knife guides and books. But anyway, his quote here is that Colonel Tom Dunlap was the hardware and cutlery buyer for Sears in the 1910s to the 40s period. He created the Craftsman brand of tools sold by Sears, though this brand was not used on knives until after World War II. He also created the Sears National Hardware Week promotion. I learned from him about the late Albert M. Baer, who sold Sears all of its knives from 1922 into the 1980s. And of course, Albert Baer was from Imperial and the whole conglomeration of the whole Imperial Knife Consortium. In the 1930s, Dunlap asked Baer to create 3 knife brands for Sears at 3 price points. All 3 were manufactured by Camillus. The brands were Stay Sharp, which was the best model, Dunlap, which was middle of the road, and Quick Cut, which was a budget knife. So there is some interesting information. I did not know about all of these different knife brands and trademarks other than the Craftsman. Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory lane, learning a little bit more about some of the house brand knives. You know, these Guidesmen, we think of them as, just cheap budget knives, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, is your grandson or great-grandson going to run across one of these or one of the old Ozark trails and say, who made this? What's the blade steel in them? We don't know. what we take for granted today may become highly collectible in the future. Now, I decided to stick with just 5 companies for today. I know there's other house brands out there. The Primble knives made for Belknap Hardware. Maybe I'll do something on them here at a later time. If you know of some other house brands, why, please leave it in the comment below, and I'll try to do some research on that house brand also. So until next time, have a very delightful day.